Look, I couldn't wait. Hey, it's Romania Black, and I'm not gonna lie, I did not intend to record this episode this early. As I'm recording it, episode 20 is about to come out on Patreon, and episode 19 is about to come out onto YouTube. And I was gonna wait a little bit, but I was talking in the Discord yesterday, and we were talking about this arc and just thoughts about it in general and things like that. And some of the patrons were like, "So have you watched episode 22?" And I was like, "No, it's next on my list." And they were like, "Okay." And I was like, and so I intended to watch it later this week, but then I was like, "No, I want to watch it now." I still do have some comments to talk about before we start this, so it's not like I'm coming into it with nothing from the comment section to talk about. But I wanted to go ahead and get to this episode because I'm really, really enjoying this arc. It's a lot of fun, and there's been like some very converse opinions about it, which I that's awesome. I obviously, whenever you get to different arcs in a series, especially a long running series, everybody has their favorites. Everybody has the arcs that they like. Everybody has the arcs that they're like, it was okay. And everybody has, sometimes they have arcs that they don't like. And so it's kind of like, it's just apples and oranges. And what I like about this arc, one, it's changing the game. Like, I'm all for like a vibe and a tone throughout a series, but if it's going to be a long running series and it's just more of the same, I'm like, but what else can we do? And I feel like Frieren is kind of doing that. They're like, all right, we first half of this series, we've set up the emotional stakes of our main trio. We've set up their characters. We've developed their characters. And we've set up kind of the world that they're comfortable in. And if you want to do more of the same, that's nice. It's a vibe. But we know that in real life, when you get comfortable with something, you're often going to get thrown into uncomfortable environments, especially the more people you encounter, the more diverse perspectives and viewpoints you encounter. So, how are you going to handle that? And to set up a character like Frieren, who is so introverted and has spent 1,000 years isolated away from everyone and only around people she's really comfortable with. Like, she went with Himmel and Hader and them because she was comfortable with them. She's with Fern and Stark because she's comfortable with them. But to now take her and be like, okay, you've sat out the last 1,000 years. Here's what's been going on. Deal with it. And then just throw her into the fray. I think it's really smart and I like it. And then somebody in the Discord was commenting saying that some people didn't like this arc because we'd had the main trio and they're so established and there's been so much development with their character, and then we throw in all these extra characters. Let me tell you, I grew up watching shonen where I grew up with the big three, with Naruto, with One Piece, and with Bleach. I grew up in a manga world where you would be reading a chapter and all of a sudden there's 20 new characters and you're like, I gotta know these bitches. What? and so I am a character driven person when I watch shows. So I'm like, bring it on. I'm like the Melissa Joan Hart meme where she's like eating all the pancakes and she's like, there's just so much. Yeah, give it to me. I grew up with Bleach, baby, where Kubo's like, here's 12 characters that now you have to know and understand. And I'm like, I guess. So I like it, and what I like about it, the way that Frieren does it, is they spent the last 12 or 13 episodes building up Stark, Fern, and Frieren to where we really get to know their characters, and now introducing all of these new characters. It's like, okay, obviously this series isn't just going to end with this season, so we're going to have all of this time, assumedly, later on to explore these characters, to get more with Denken, to get more with Ubel, to get more maybe with Verbal, to get more with Jeannot and Sense. So we're going to have more opportunities to get to know these characters. It just maybe is going to be spread out over the course of the series, but we're going to introduce them now so you can kind of get an idea about them and Sari and the others, and then we'll explore them later, maybe individually, maybe as a group. It brings off a lot of potential and possibilities. And I really like that. And plus, at the end of the day, yeah, as much as I would love to just walk around with Frieren and learn little spells and do little odd Kiki's delivery service odd jobs and to have her pine over Himmel, as much as I want to see that, and I'm sure we will see that as we go, I think it is time in the series. We're getting to that point in the series where you got to introduce some conflict. You got to have something happen. And to throw Frieren, who is this kind of pacifist, into this world where her rival, essentially Sari, has been doing the exact opposite of her and organizing this entire magic, like it's like the magic alliance from Arrested Development. I think it's really smart and I like it a lot. I have a lot of fun with it. To that credit, when we get to the comments here, Alex Cornejo said that Frieren, she's not lazy. She's just efficient. She's a procrastinator. And yeah, by Frieren standards, she's not lazy. She's just procrastinating. She's just holding off to the last minute. And this is her way of doing it. I'm like, that makes the most sense. Nago, as well as Alessi Kali, talked about a little bit of translation. Richter means judge in German, which I'm like, okay, a Richter scale is like a measurement, a judgment of sorts. So that all makes sense. That all ties together. Land just means land. Which I think is really funny. He's just like, I am what I am, right? He kind of wears himself on his sleeve a little bit, despite him being slightly mysterious. So I like that. Sharf means sharp. Heir means honor, which her name kind of is interesting because her name means honor. She says her dad was a first-class mage, so I'm like, okay, you're my honor. You're my daughter. Like, there's a sense of responsibility there. Poor her not making it to the next round. Well, no, they are making it to the next round. I always forget that their group just caught the still out of nowhere. I forgot it last episode. I forget it here. I thought they were done for. No, they're still here. So there we go. Laufen means running. A very on the nose name, but we'll take it. Giselle is the birds, and they mean hostage, which I think is interesting because you could tie it to Jeannot. If Jeannot can become a bird, is his heart a hostage to Seri and the order that she's established? Is he a hostage and is he a prisoner within the system that Seri has set up? He's very precise. So I'm so fascinated by Jeannot's character. There's so much you can do with him. There's like an Aaron Burr. I talked about Aaron Burr related to Denken. I also see it with Jeannot. There's like an angst factor. I'm obsessed with Jeannot and I know nothing about him. So we'll see where that goes, but I'm obsessed with Jeannot. I want to get to know Jeannot, basically. And then Christopher Peterson talked about Himmel. This part is really good to bring up. Himmel, for all the power that he had in the party of heroes and all of the clout that he had and all of the reputation he had at the time, because he saved so many villages and they all know him, he has this reputation to his name, he could have gone on and had a lot of political influence, like what Denken is seeking, like what others in the system are seeking, but he chose to live a more peaceful existence. It's almost like he took after Frieren and was like, I don't need all that clout. I don't need that power. And for someone that comes across and presents himself kind of as vain as Himmel kind of can do in the flashbacks we've seen, I think it's very telling of his actual character in that he may come across as vain and be like, oh, make me pose for all the statues. But at the end of the day, he could have used his reputation and clout as a means of political advantage. But instead, he just lived out the rest of his days waiting for his crush to come back and like watch a meteor shower with him before he died. So it's like, yeah, I think that says a lot for Himmel's character. And so I think it's interesting. And so my question, though, with that is, are warriors not as entrenched in the political system like the mages? It seems like Seri has set up where the mages are the politicians. They are in a political sphere and all this certification and nonsense. Whereas the warriors are just like, we're here to save the day, I guess. I feel like Seri has done a lot to make the mage position very political, and I find that intriguing. So, yeah. I'm super excited for this episode. I really am. I'm excited to see what's going to happen. I'm excited to see what we're going to do. Are we going to go straight into... It said we had 2 days between now and the second exam. So are we going to have downtime or are we going to montage it and go straight into the second exam? I would like for us to have some downtime for some character work, but I'm not sure if we're going to do that. So we'll just find out. But we're not going to waste any more time. We are going to dive right into episode 22 of Frieren Beyond Journey's End. And we are going to do that here in 3, 2, 1. And let's... Tally-ho! Well, this was a lovely pre-final arc of the season episode. Yeah, we only have 6 episodes left, and I think the first exam took, like, well, if we technically count episodes 18, 19, 20, and 21, that's 4-ish episodes by the time we get to it. So, yeah, if we're looking at it that way, then with 6 episodes left, it would make sense that we do 4 or 5 episodes to cover the second exam, and then we would have possibly 1 or 2 episodes to be our little downtime before we preface the third exam, which is where we end the season. And I think that's what they're going to do, because we only have 2 proctors at this point that have been introduced. You have the proctors, for the first exam. You have the proctor since for the second exam, which we'll talk about. And we don't know the third exam proctor. If there even is a proctor, we don't know what the third exam is going to be. So, we don't exactly, they may have to go into the north and test themselves, and that's the third exam. We don't know what it's going to entail, but it would make sense if we would finish the second exam, have that downtime, and then right as the season ends, they either introduce who the proctor is for the third exam and what the third exam is going to be, or they tell us what the third exam is going to be, and we leave off for season 2 and start out season 2 with that third exam. We'll see with that third test. We'll see where we go to from here. But this episode was very interesting. There was a lot of little nuggets of information that are just kind of like scattered about like crumbs, and we're little birds picking them up. There's been a lot of bird motifs in this second half of Frieren, whether it's talking about the birds around Himmel and the OP, whether it's talking about Jeannot and his apparent bird-like ability to become Birdman, whether it's talking about the demon birds that have killed the other competitors in this first exam with the still. There's a lot of birds being symbolized in this arc specifically. And I think that's interesting. But I feel like there's a lot of little nuggets of information that are good to know. But other than that, this was just like a fun episode to show some downtime. There are some things that I wish the episode would have done, but those are just my little wish list. And we'll kind of talk about that. I could see maybe some people being like, this episode was a waste of time. But I don't think it was. I do think it was pretty important to establish a couple little things here and there that are going to show up later on in the series, I think. So we need to probably go through that. Now, with the teams that have made it through the first trial, we went down. Jeannot narrowed the field from 57 to 18. Just sliced them down, right, to our final 6 teams that made it through. And I think we need to go through who made that list and who they are. And kind of, I want to show where I place those individuals in this thing here. So why Barcoons come out, I have my I think these folks are safe category. The ones I think are going to be perfectly fine. They're going to be able to handle this. They got this. My I don't know category. And then the, oh, y'all in trouble. That's my you're in trouble category right there, based on what we find out in this episode. So, with obviously Frieren, Fern, and Denken, I'm not worried about them. I think they got this. I think that they're able to handle themselves. I think they'll be fine. And it's not just protagonist syndrome with Fern and Frieren. I genuinely think they're strong enough they'll be okay. Richter, I don't know. Richter is an interesting character. We'll talk about him in this episode and kind of what his character does, and the fact that he's a local boy that's grown up in this environment, so he kind of is probably jaded by seeing these trials happen over and over again, but he obviously has some kind of connection to the village, so I don't know. Richter is kind of in my question mark category. I don't know what to make about him. And then LaVine and Kenna, I'm worried about them. Like, girls, if Frieren hadn't been in your team this first test, y'all would have been dead because those birds probably would have eaten you. I mean, maybe LaVine would have been okay, but I think that Kenna would have like died for sure if Frieren hadn't been there, because we saw that happen. And then Laufin worries me a little bit, because from this episode, we kind of get the idea that she's sort of being taken care of by Denken, and Denken's kind of spoiling her, and Richter's kind of like, what are you, his granddaughter? So the fact that she kind of seems a little less independent, and we saw in the last episode that she couldn't make the rational decision. She couldn't just leave with the bird and have them win the challenge. She had to save Denken, shows that I think she's going to make a fatal flaw because she's too reliant upon him. And maybe him doting on her is kind of his flaw too. So I really want like a parenting discussion between Frieren and Denken, because you have these two characters, Denken and Frieren, who are older, wiser, but they're both kind of foster parents towards these young female characters in Fern and Laufin's case. And I feel like Frieren kind of has a little bit more of a hands-off approach with Fern, which has worked successfully. And I feel like Denken's a little doting on her, which is a little detrimental to her character. So I would love to see a conversation between them about parenting, but I don't know if we'll get it this season or not. So we have this first party. The very first party that was selected was Method, Tone, or Ton. I think it's Tone though. And then Longa, Tone, and Method. I'm so curious about them and their characters. We're going to put them down here for now until we get a little bit more with them, and then we'll move them up into these categories later on. Longa, we'll put her on here, and Method. They were the characters that were with all of the weapons that literally killed everybody to get the bird. They seem a little bit ruthless. So they were in the first party. Okay. We'll go back to them if I can remember who they are as we go through there. Yep. Then we have obviously LaVine, Frieren, and Kenna. We got them. And then we have Land, Fern, and Ubel. Land and Ubel are my new ship. I freaking love them. We're going to talk about them this episode, but I love them as a ship. I think that I'm not exactly sure. I think I'm going to put Land and Ubel in this category. I think they're going to be okay for now. They're kind of skirting into Richter land where I'm not sure if they're going to be safe or not, but I have a feeling they're going to possibly work together. Ubel, her character, I love her character's ability. We'll talk about it. Then we have Air, Sharf, and Werble. Air worries me a bit. Air worries me because we didn't see her this episode with Verbal and Sharf. Verbal and Sharf seem like they're kind of a pair. They kind of work tag teaming it. Air worries me a little bit because she's not particularly strong in any case of the categories. She's just kind of like, she's good, but she's not like, you know, she doesn't have ability that excels, right? And she does have kind of a weakness already established with her character. And the fact that her dad's like a first-class mage, it seems like it's setting up for her to fail and for the dad to kind of get involved. I don't know if that's going to happen or not, but it just seems like it's possibly the case. I'm going to put Verbal and Sharf over here. I don't know if I think their characters will succeed or not. We've gotten a little bit more focus on them. We'll talk about them in Stark having a bro trip. But I don't know. I feel like if they don't pass the test, I don't think it's going to crush them. I think the last episode, they had kind of accepted their fate and that they weren't going to pass and they were going to go back up north and keep doing what they were doing. So I feel like if they don't pass this test, as long as they stay alive, it's like, okay, well, you didn't pass, but you're still alive, so we're all good. I don't know. I feel like they'll be fine regardless of if they pass or not. And then we have Richter, Denken, and Laufin, which we've talked about. I'm a little bit concerned about them. Then we have the 17th party. Blay, who is One Punch Man, Edel, the girl there, and then Dunst. I don't feel like any of these three are going to pass. I don't know. They were having trouble getting the bird to begin with, and they cornered it at the last minute. So I could be totally wrong. I'm fully prepared to be wrong about all of this. But I'm going to put Dunst, Edel, and Blay here. I just don't see them. I feel that they are the fodder team. I feel like the two teams we don't know very well, which is the first team and the last team, because they are the lowest number. I feel like they are being set up to be the fodder, like the red shirts. They're going to have to go down. They're easy, like pick them off. And then I feel like this team, there's going to be more to them. But we're going to go back through the episode and see what they're all doing before we make those assumptions. So yeah, let's skip the intro and go back here. And of course they're at the Sparrow Inn. You know, poor Stark. Stark is bored. Basically, Stark is bored. He doesn't have anything to do at this point. And while he claims that he's been enjoying his time off away from his wife, Fern, and Frieren, he's been kind of bored. You can tell he's just kind of like, well, what do I do now? And he's been training, so it's not like he's been doing nothing. We're going to go back to that old man. Talk about him real quick when we get to him. But I'm glad that Fern and Frieren are back, and Stark's like, oh, thank God. Y'all are back. But Fern is not happy that he was sleeping all day and wasting time. And Stark's like, oh my God, we're practically married. What do we do? And he's like, well, I stayed up late and drank juice. I'm like, it's just juice, girl. It'll be okay. Fern is so moody. She is, you know, going through her like rebellious teenage phase, and by that she's grumpy and hangry all the time. And I feel like Frieren's like, was I ever like that 1,000 years ago? Did I go through a stage like that? I feel like Frieren did with Flom, because I feel like Frieren probably did go through like a rebellious phase with Flom, and Flom's like, oh, Frieren, and now Frieren's living through the same thing with Fern. I feel for Stark and Frieren, though, because there's some aspects of Frieren that Fern really embodies, and then there's some aspects of Stark that Frieren totally gets along with and agrees with, because Stark resembles Himmel in a way, right? And so then their whole goal this episode is just to keep Fern happy, which is quite a task, right? And the thing about it is, I feel like Fern got along so well with Land and Ubel, because Land and Ubel are kind of sticklers like she is, and particular like she is. So even though they have different kind of moral compasses and different personalities per se, there are aspects about Land and Ubel that are similar to Fern in a way where she wouldn't be grumpy around them, because they just all gel. I guess so. But they decide, I feel like Frieren just wanted to use cheering Fern up as an excuse to go to this expensive restaurant that Himmel had taken her to all those years ago, and that was their excuse. Although Stark does bring up a very good point. 80 years ago, will it still be there? Because this trip that my speech team I helped coach, we took a trip to nationals last month. And the last time we had gone to this location for nationals had been like 3 or 4 years. It had been pre-quarantine. And so the other coach I work with, she was like, oh yeah, there's this really good restaurant that's there. We should totally go back to it. And when we called back, quarantine just slammed it. It was completely gone. And I was like, oh no. And she was like, no. So when he said that, if it would still be there, I genuinely did have that concern of, it's been 80 years. What if it didn't make it? But in Frieren's world, they didn't go through a pandemic, so it's still there. And it's better than ever. So my one regret in this episode, my wish list, would be, honestly, I wanted them all to kind of end up at the same table, and for them all to kind of like be like a full house situation where they're all like eating and talking back and forth. But that's a very fan servicey wish for me, and that's me wanting my cake and eat it too. I think it makes much more sense that Denken and his table, they acknowledge Frieren's there, but they're like, hey, they're doing their own thing, we're doing our thing, we're not enemies right now, let's just go eat our food and just be cordial. And I think it makes more sense that it happened the way that it did. So Richter works at this little tinker store, tinkering on things, making them better, and the one old lady keeps seeing him, and he has like all the mage staffs, he has all the lanterns, his shop has a symbol of scales representing it, and he's a judge, so it's all very symbolic. I like it. And I like the idea that Richter is a local. He's lived here his whole life. He knows the clientele, but he also, because he lives here, knows about the mage exams, knows about the organization. It adds so much to his character now, where he talks about the privilege in the last few episodes and why it's so important. He would know that importance, and he would know and have a certain bias towards the organization because he's grown up with it his whole life. He's been constantly seeing it in front of him, and he's seen mages come in, try to take the exam and fail, so he knows the stakes of what's at risk. So I think it says a lot for his character that he spared Kenna and LaVine's life because he's a kind person. He's a kind person with a good heart, but he's grown up in kind of this jaded town where he's seen the organization and how the system works. And it just adds so much to his character. I like Richter's character a lot more after this episode because it gives us a little bit of definition and dimension to him, which is fun. And the idea that he's still getting sugar cubes, which that felt like such a Stark moment where he's, given sugar cubes. And he's like, I'm not a kid anymore. I'm a middle-aged man. And she's like, you're always still a kid to me. That felt like an Ison Stark moment to me. So then, again, we have Denken show up. And I feel like, again, the sweets, you have Richter kind of lamenting the fact he's like, well, why do I have these sweets? I don't need these sweets. I'm not a kid anymore. I'm an adult. And then who shows up but Denken, and Laufen's eating sweets that Denken's giving her. So of course Richter kind of like complains to her, being like, look, I just had to chase off this old woman who tried to give me sweets as a reward because I was like, no, I'm an adult. You're just sitting there taking it and enjoying it. And she's like, yeah, what of it? It's a donut. So it's really interesting to see how Laufen handles Denken spoiling her, versus Richter handling the old woman spoiling him. So I thought that was really, really interesting. But damn, Richter tries to disassociate himself from Denken and the others because, again, he's grown up in this town. He knows how this test goes. He knows that they're probably going to be enemies. And he's like, and Richter has a good heart. And you can tell he gets attached. And he's like, I don't want to get attached to you all as a team because then when I have to fight you all, I don't want to feel bad. And that makes perfect sense. But damn, Daddy Denken just coming out with the dead wife card. I was like, oh, we gotta play that. I was like, oh my God. Like he was like, oh, well, you know, my wife used to eat with me here long ago, 50 years ago, and it'd be nice to go eat at this restaurant again. And Richter's like, how dare you? I thought that was genius. I was like, damn Denken, just playing that card. Well, before she passed away, I just wanted to have the taste of that food again. I was like, oh, you. And I'm sure he's being sentimental and being real with it, but it's just like, damn, him pull that out. Again, another comparison between Frieren and Denken, not only in their philosophies about this whole privilege and the mage exam, but the idea of Denken having lost his loved one and Frieren having lost her loved one. I just need Denken and Frieren to sit down and have a conversation. I just need this. I don't think I'm asking for much. I think that I'm asking for all the things that should be asked for. So come on, series, give this to me. So we'll see if that ends up happening or not, but damn. And Richter's like, fine, I'll go if you're buying. Then we have Land. We get a little bit about Land. Land is constantly alone. He's isolated, which is ironic because his ability lets him make clones of himself. So all the friends he needs, right? But Land is very cautious. He's very strategic. He doesn't want to give all his cards away. And he seems rather emotional. He just, is a little bit more, hidden about it. He's also a cat. He's also a cat person. There are people that are dog people and people that are cat people. Ubel and Land are cat people. For sure. You will not convince me otherwise. And he's definitely a cat person. But I also think he kind of has a thing for people that are standoffish towards him. Like, he doesn't seem to want to get mushy-gushy and sentimental around people. He seems to like it when things are standoffish against him because he's kind of like, good, you don't want to be next to me, whatever. But he also, in that moment, seems to like want to connect to like the cat. He seems like he wants to connect with someone, but he just finds himself constantly being ostracized. And then look who shows up. Ubel. She's like, you don't use a clone whenever you're in town, so I'm meeting the actual one of you. And he's like, well, can we walk if we're going to make small talk? Why do we have to stand here? And she's like, if you try to run from me, I just might kill you. And so then he's like, why didn't you kill Verbal? You seem like you have no problem killing people, which is true. Ubel does not seem to have a problem killing people. She killed those bandits. He's like, well, then why did you hesitate to kill Verbal? What was the point? Why did you spare him? And we find out why, which is amazing. She's like, well, see, the thing is, I wanted to relate to him. I wanted to empathize with him. And because I empathized with him, I learned his magic. I love it! I love the idea that Ubel's ability is using empathy to copy magic. Because at first I was like, oh, is she like Kisei from Kuroko's Basketball where she can just copy people's abilities? Because that seems really OP, right? But they add in the twist that she can't just copy it. It has to be that she empathizes with them. And if she empathizes them, then she emotionally can take on their magic and use it for herself. But if she can't empathize with you, then it doesn't work. That's so good. I love that so much. And it's like, yes, please. Because there's a chance, because what that does is she can't just kill you right off the bat if she wants to know your magic. She has to learn about you first and become friends with you, become able to empathize with you, then she can steal your magic and kill you. It's like the ultimate stab you in the back Caesar et tu Brute move. And the best part about it is she obviously would want to learn Land's skill because being able to copy yourself is amazing. If she can copy herself and not have to be in that location to battle and it still be effective, then that's an incredible ability. Right? So she's like, of course I want that ability. The hilarious thing is that Land doesn't want to get to know her. It's so wonderful, the setup with their dynamic and their relationship. And it's why I ship them so much after this episode, because you have two enemies who have to stay enemies. But while they're staying enemies, they're getting to know each other. It's like enemies to lovers, but you don't change from enemies to lovers. You become enemies and lovers. I'm like, yes, yes, please. Give me this ship. I love this ship. Because, yeah, it's the idea that Land wants to make a connection with people. He feels kind of ostracized because of his ability, so it seems. But he can't get to know Ubel too much, or she'll steal his magic, and she may ostracize and leave him, or at worst, kill him. And Ubel seems curious about him, wants to get to know him. It's just, oh, I love it. It's so good. It's so good. I also like that her magic and the way it's used, it doesn't look as finessed or refined as Verbal's does, because she's just using it for the first time. She's like, the magic specializes in strongly related to their life and nature. She's like, I've always been this way. Empathizing with someone allows me to use their spells. And he's like, well, basically what it means is that, she's like, your clones are perfect copies of yourself. So she's like, what goes through that head of yours? What life do you live? I want to know so that I can use that magic too. It's like the Jungle Book, Disney's The Jungle Book. It's like, I want to be like you. Ubel is like living that song day in and day out. And he's like, you use magic by way of feeling. And he says the type of mage who casts spells without understanding the principles behind them. Yeah, which that fits Ubel's like kind of like carefree wild child personality. It's so cool. It gives her this kind of depth to where she has to get to know people to steal their magic. But the whole point of her stealing magic by getting to know people shows she doesn't really care about the spells. She's just like, I just want to learn it so I can use it. It just, it fits her personality so well. I'm in love with it. Yes, please. More of this. I'm just like, that's such good writing. I like it. It's unexpected, but it fits her character and doesn't feel out of character. I could sing its praises all day, but I'm going to not gush anymore over it. And the fact that he's like, well, I don't like dim-witted people like you. And she's like, well, that didn't answer my question. Oh my God, it's just the perfect setup. He's like, I don't like you. I don't want to be around you. And she's like, well, fine, then I'm going to stay around you. And it's great. I am all about it. So yeah, just a great moment between these two. I love the fact that they're going to be stuck together, going on fake dates. A little, like, over and over again. He's like, I hate it. And she's like, don't follow me. She's like, yep, here we go. So yeah, I think it's important to know the type of meal that they all order. Stark orders the omelet over rice, which is what Himmel ordered, and it's what Frieren recommended him to get. So, you know, here we go. I like that it's kind of like a childlike dish, but it fits Stark's personality. Frieren just orders like a half a dozen steaks, because she's OP. She needs the power. She needs the protein. Give a girl some protein. She's basically making up for all the protein she's not been able to get over the last 1,000 years. My mind's in the gutter. You'll have to all excuse me. But yeah, girl gets some steak. She's having the Goku diet. And then Fern, I think it's important that she has like the pancakes, the cake, the parfait. Girl just having all the sweets to give her that sugar high, right? Give her that boost, you know. I think it's great. And then we go back to her looking at what her and her party did, where it's interesting that they got the heirloom knife and returned it to the chef that the demons took from him. That thing looks insane. And Lecker, the chef of the century, is like, I'll make you all the food that you want. So then we look back. Himmel got the exact same dish. Frieren got the same dish, except there's like a little apple tart beside it, showing she has a little sweet there. Hyder is oddly enough drinking very sparingly. He just has some cheese and chickpeas and like a little steak medallions and a salad. I like that Ison has like the bread and like the little chicken wings and stuff. It's all very meager, but very good. Frieren, I like that we see from the flashbacks in the first couple of episodes, it would seem like Frieren was just kind of hanging out there and she didn't really have any interactions with her group. She was just kind of along for the ride as the mage. But then we get to scenes like this, it shows that no, she actually had personality. She actually was engaging with them. They had moments. And like her getting the big pile of steaks is kind of hilarious in relation to everyone else. I love it. It's great. And so then she's like, you say that you're never going to change your recipes, but she's like, there's so many flavors but there are many flavors I've never been able to experience again. And that's when the chef's like, oh, well, what do you mean? And Himmel, our medieval fantasy Jesus, in this moment is like, Frieren's not going to be able to experience the same taste again. She's not going to be able to remember me at this restaurant. Oh, we have to solve that problem. Himmel is bound and determined. He's on a mission to make sure that no matter where Frieren goes, she is going to remember him and she's going to savor that. And I'm like, you get you some, Himmel. You do that. And so I like that the chef says, well, I'm going to pass down my recipes over and over again and the recipes won't change. And Frieren's like, yeah, sure, Jan, you say that. But over time, chefs are going to want to leave their mark. The recipe is going to change. And Himmel's like, well, that's not necessarily a bad thing. If it's still an amazing recipe, you're still going to be able to savor it. And it's not going to be, what I like about this moment is it's her idea of, once I've had this good memory, I'm never going to have it again. And Himmel's like, yeah, you may never have the exact same memory to the same capacity, but that doesn't mean you're not going to have memories that are better than what you had before. And so when she has the food this time, she's like, well, the flavor's changed, but I'm not looking to collect lightning in a bottle again. I love that Frieren's like, look, I know the taste has changed, but that's okay. I'm not here to recreate the moment that I had before. That's not possible, but this is better. So I'm going to savor this for what it is and be thankful that it's better and that it's still here. It's like, she gets to re-experience the memories of her party in this restaurant, but now she's had new memories with her new party, and it's even better. And it's just, Himmel can't do anything wrong. There's a reason why he's dead in this story, because otherwise you wouldn't believe that he exists, right? I love it. And the fact that Himmel says, make sure that it lasts into the future. That's the thing I ask you. And the look that she gives him is like, you want me to come back here? Like Frieren's just face, like constantly being surprised. The more this series goes on, the more I'm like, Frieren, it took you till he died to realize that you love this man? What? What? Damn it. And then we go back, like just her little face. Oh, it's so sweet. And then, yeah, and of course Stark thinks it's so good. She's like, the flavor's changed, but now I don't have to look for tastier flavors. It's better now than it was back then. Oh, that's so sweet. Meanwhile, we cut to what the others are having, which is, it looks like basically Laufin is having the same thing that Stark had. And then, oddly enough, Denken is having the same thing that Ison had. So, I'm not surprised by that. The men with beards, they have the same thing, right? And Denken's like, you have to eat your vegetables. Mm-hmm. And then they talk about, we see the soup that Lan's eating, and Ubel's being like, man, you're lighter either than I expected. Tell me more about your life so I can empathize with you and steal your magic. And he's like, shut up. Love it. I love it. So anyway, Fern feels all better. She's all super happy. And then we cut to, the one thing that is interesting is it felt like a manga chapter cut, and we're halfway through the episode, so that makes sense. But it felt like the end of a manga chapter was Frieren saying, I used up all my savings. And then we cut straight to this just random old man helping Stark, which feels like the start of a new manga chapter. And he's like, this is the state of nothingness. You've arrived at the essence of martial arts. And Stark's like, I don't know who this man is. He's like, what is happening? And Frieren, she's like, do I know him? Have I met him before? She's like, who is this guy? And he's like, I don't know. He comes to talk to me while I'm training. So she's like, well, you attract a lot of weird people. And he's like, tell me about it. So I'm curious. I don't know if that old man is like a red herring and we're never going to see him again. And it's just meant to be a little throwaway joke that he meets weird people. Or if the old man is like talking about the state of nothingness, if he recognizes heroes maybe, and he sees Stark as like a hero like Himmel. Or if by chance the old man is like, he knows Stark's father and brother and he's going to connect back to that. I don't know. If it's a throwaway character just for a joke, okay. But if he ends up coming back and being something else, then I won't be surprised. So Fern's mad again. Teenage girl woes. And Frieren's like, I don't know what to do about this. And she's like, you need to mediate for us. Which is interesting because Cyan wanted Frieren to mediate between Stark and Fern. So I don't know if the fact that she's teaching Stark to mediate, if that's a sign that Frieren is expecting that this second exam might separate them apart and that he needs to be prepared to be able to handle Fern if Frieren doesn't come back. I don't know. I don't know if that's setting up something or if it's just, Frieren being like, I don't want to deal with her. Help me. And he's like, no, I'm scared. And she's like, well, you guys are married, so you might as well take care of things, right? And I like that Stark is so sweet. He tries to like cajole and she's like, I want snacks. And he's like, God damn it. He's like, this is such a pain in the butt. It reminds me of the story my father told me that when my mother was pregnant with me, that one night she woke up in the middle of the night and she's like, I want this specific brand of cookies. And my dad was like, she's like, I want cookies. And he's like, well, we don't have that specific brand that you want here. And she's like, I want those cookies. And my dad was like, well, I guess I'm going to the store at 2 a.m. to get you these cookies. Stark feels like that. He feels like him and Fern are already married. And he's like, I put up with this because I love her. And that line, we'll get to it, though. That line where she was like, anything's fine. He's like, that means she wants something specific. Yes. That's such a thing. That is such a trope. It doesn't happen with all women, but I've seen women, my mother included, that's just like, no, anything's fine. And my dad's like, no, that means that it's something specific. Yeah, Stark's married and he just doesn't understand or realize it. So we come back to Kenna. Kenna doesn't seem to have like any family or relations that she looks back to. I don't know if she's an orphan or whatnot, but Verbal and Sharf are looking around trying to find a warrior to help them with like just an odd mission, like just a random side quest, if this were like a game. And then we see LaVine. LaVine is so sweet. She's so pretty. Also, her having like 3 hot brothers and a MILF mom is like, seems appropriate. And she's the youngest and they all dote on her. That all makes sense. Her brothers are all incredibly gorgeous. All of them. Love it. She's like, they always buy me crap I don't need. And her mom's like, of course. And she's like, I hate this. But I am totally here for the LaVine and Kenna relationship. It's there. I mean, if Stark and Fern are in a relationship, LaVine and Kenna are in a relationship. 1000%. I'm all here for it. I am supporting completely. And I love that instantly, like, you see this moment and you think, oh, LaVine and Kenna are gonna have this little romantic gist. No, then they're fighting each other. They are literally Stark and Fern 2.0. Mm-hmm. So then they're looking through the bread shop, and yeah, that's when Stark's like, that means she wants something specific. Oh my God. And so she's like, you can choose. And he's like, don't ask me. So LaVine and Kenna show up and kind of clear the air, which is great. And Stark, you reap what you sow. Be careful what you wish for. He's like, I don't want to be surrounded by all these girls, which is understandable. So what ends up happening? Verbal and Sharf come up and steal him away for a side quest. Which I'm kind of glad because, I feel for Stark. He's stuck, with Fern, who's being a little bit grumpy. And instead, they all get to go have a girls' day. And Stark gets to go actually hang out with some guys that seem about his own age, right? Because Cyan, even though Cyan was a guy that Stark could hang out with, Cyan was older. And so it's kind of like if Richter hung out with Stark. It's like, cool, you both are guys, but, they're not the same age, so their interests are going to be a lot different. And here, with Verbal and Sharf, I like that they have kind of a guy's day. And they go and hang out and battle beasts and everything and then get to eat meat. It's super fun. I like it. I think it's really cute. But I wanted to see what the other groups were doing because we kind of got like a little montage of them and how they're handling things as they hang out. And yeah, so we have LaVine and Kenna saying like, no, you guys, you saved us, Frieren. Don't say that you didn't do anything. And we cut back to medieval fantasy Jesus as they've slain like a giant goat man. And the one girl thanks Himmel and she's like, why do you save people? And he's like, well, yeah, I want to help people, but I also do it for myself because I want people to remember me. And he's like, to live is to be known and remembered by others. Which is, yeah, humans have such a short time in this world that, we want to leave a legacy. And sometimes we want to leave a legacy that is, you know, in writing, that's, you know, a statue, that's a memorial scholarship fund, something like that. Like some people want to leave very pragmatic and concrete, you know, remembrances of them from beyond their death. But then others, it's like if I just do things to help people and they just remember me helping and spread that like through oral tradition, that works too. So it's like some people want actual literal concrete memorials of them and their service to be, you know, remembered by future generations. And others like Himmel, he's like, as long as people just remember me and I saved somebody's life or changed it a little bit, that's enough. And I'm like, quit being perfect. So yeah, but I really like that Himmel kind of touches into humanity in all of his speeches. And Frieren can't quite understand that because she's an elf. She lives for thousands of years. She's like, I like that she just looks at him like, I hadn't thought of it that way, because for her, time is not as fleeting as humanity. But I'm also like, girl, you just realized you loved him after he died? Ah! But at least we get this really cute scene with them all eating cookies. It's super nice. And they're having this little moment. And I love that Frieren has her little, like her knees tucked together. And it's super cute. And she's just savoring this moment with all of them. It's very sweet. I'm like, good for you. Meanwhile, she's like, she starts talking about her struggles. And she's like, we're going to make Fern upset. And then that's when LaVine says, yeah, we're going to be enemies for the next exam. And this bird aggressively chucked that mission statement at them and then just flew away. But yes, the Continental Magic Association, notification of the second examination for the first class mage in the ruins of the king's tomb 3 days later. Sensei, Sense is in charge. I love Sense's signature there. Okay, so in 3 days, they're going to meet in the king's tomb. All right. I'm like, what are we going to be doing in this king's tomb? Now, LaVine makes a statement that Sense being the proctor is not a good thing. Being like, she's proctored 4 tests in the past. I doubt that she's proctored 2 exams of the 3. So meaning she's at least proctored one of the exams of the 3 each time they've had it in the past. If it's every 3 years, that means the past 12 years she's been proctoring. Which girl could be in her 30s and have started proctoring tests in her 20s. So that's not unrealistic with how she looks. And plus, you can't tell people's ages with how they look in this series. Denken could very well be in his 80s and looks like he's in his like mid-50s, right? Frieren's 1,000 years old and looks like she's 17, right? You can't really judge by that. But no one has passed her test in 12 years. Meaning, what that means is that no one has become a first-class mage in the last 12 years. Meaning, since she's probably become a first-class mage, no one else has. And that ties with her being a pacifist. So we'll talk about that here in a hot second. And Fern's like, well, that's scary. So Denken gets the note. He's hanging out in his room. What else do we get here? We have Denken. Richter gets it as he's like with the scales there and making the medicine and bouncing out. Laufin's still got that basket of donuts on the rooftop hanging out. Could be above the rooftop where Denken is. We see Longue with her scrolls, like she's studying up on spells. I'm going to put Longue right here. I don't know about her, what we're going to get with her yet. She's kind of a mystery, but she's studying up on spells. So I feel like she's going to be stronger than she looks. Then we have Land and Ubel getting it. And I like that Land's reading and Ubel's like, tell me more, tell me more. Love it. And just getting in his space. Then we have Tone. Hi, sir, in your bathtub just chilling out with your thing of wine. I don't know. I'm going to put Ton here as well. I'm a little curious about him. He seems like a pretty boy, but I don't know which way that could go. And then we have these 3 that are all traveling together reading it. Again, I think that they're fodder. I think that they're fodder. I think them still acting as a team is going to be to their downfall. I don't know. And then we have Air, who hasn't even read the note yet. She's just sitting there meditating. I still think she's not going to pass, but I could be wrong about her. Meanwhile, the one method, she's like just strangling the bird. She seems quite violent. I think she might be the strongest of the group, so I'm going to put her there. I don't know. She seems rather interesting. I love her design. And then we have I love that Sharf's the one that reads it, while meanwhile Stark and Verbal are like having a good bro moment. Stark needs more guy friends, so I'm glad him and Verbal get like a moment together to just be bros. It's great. Now, Verbal said that Stark demonstrates the essence of martial arts, which is what the old man was talking about, that Stark's mastered. So I don't know if that's supposed to be a subtle hint that Stark's a lot stronger than he appears and he just doesn't realize it yet. I don't know. But yeah, meanwhile, since she's like, I'm a pacifist, you know, unlike you. For me, the pacifism states that she does not want, and I could do this in green, but I already have the red marker in my hand. She does not want any more mages. If you look at the privilege, the wish, the spell that everyone gets granted, if you look at it that way, it seems like from Sensei's perspective, the more, I want to say that maybe in my mind, Sense views humanity as selfish and as problematic, and they cause conflict. So she may not want mages to get more and more spells because, as we've seen with Jeannot and with Sense, they're being described as monsters. So this idea, maybe Sense has the concept that the more mages that get these all-powerful spells, the more likelihood there is that they could fight amongst themselves. They could fight for power. They could fight for their position in the association. She's like, I don't want people to shake up the system. We have a system. We have enough first-class mages. We don't need any more. There's no Demon King. We're fighting off the remnants of the army. We're being successful. We don't need to create any more people with power that can uproot the system in a negative way. So her pacifism is, we're just not going to cause any more waves at all. We're not going to change the system because it doesn't need to be changed. It's fine. And we're just going to leave things the way that they are. And that's all we're going to do. We're going to keep the status quo. And she seems to want to keep the status quo. We're not going to get any more mages because they're not needed. And if we get any more, they could cause trouble. And I don't want to have to deal with that. That's what I get from her vibe. I could be wrong about her. She seems terrifying because she doesn't want to basically approve any more mages. And obviously, I think we know that there's going to be some mages past the second test. It's just a matter of if it's Frieren and Fern, or if anybody else passes. I feel like that Frieren, Fern, and Denken, to me, are going to pass. I feel like Ubel is going to pass. I want to put Land in that category. I don't know about Richter and the others. The Method, Tone, and Longue, that team, I feel like somebody from their team might pass. And they're not working as groups anymore. They're working as individuals. So, or at least we think that they are. We think that they're working as individuals. I don't know. It would be interesting if the first test had them work in groups of 3, the second test had them work in pairs, and the final test had them work solo. That would be interesting to kind of like whittle it down. I do like the idea. I think it's harder in an elimination competition to work in pairs or in a group, especially in the first trial. If one teammate doesn't pass, none of you pass. I think that adds more stakes. It makes you have to work with someone. It makes you have to figure out what to do. If they had them in pairs in the next go-round, that would be really interesting because you could put Frieren and Fern together. You could put Ubel and Land together. You could put LaVine and Kenna together if you had them work as pairs versus working individually. But then you also run into some problems with, it seems like right now they're setting for Sharf and Verbal to work together, but then who's Air going to work together? If Denken and Laufen stay together, then you could put maybe Richter and Air together, or if Richter and Laufen end up together, who would Denken end up with? I think I would rather have them work in pairs, but I don't know if that's going to be the case or if they're going to let everybody go solo. I don't know. So that's interesting. But I really like this episode. I think that despite it being super low key and there being a lot of downtime, there was also little nuggets of information that are thrown out for us that I feel are going to come back and be important later on. And Ubel's ability is just, I love it. I love it so much. So I'm curious to hear your thoughts down below, but I hope you all have a wonderful week. Please stay safe, take care, and yeah, I'm back really soon with more Frieren Beyond Journey's End. Bye!